6 climbers walked into the highest mountains of the Soviet Union. Searchers found their food supplies untouched. They found a note the group left on a mountain pass, written in the leader's hand. They found footprints. And then, nothing. Not a body, not a backpack, not a single piece of equipment. 6 experienced mountaineers dissolved into the Pamirs, and in 37 years, the mountains have returned nothing at all. This is not Dyatlov Pass, where at least there were bodies to examine, injuries to argue about, a tent to study. This is worse. This is the case with no evidence at all. The disappearance of the Klochkov group. Russian mountaineers call it the cleanest vanishing in Soviet climbing history. Tonight, we follow their trail to the exact point where it stops. Summer 1989, Leningrad. Pyotr Klochkov, an experienced mountain tourist, assembles a team for one of the most serious undertakings in Soviet mountaineering, a Category 5 route through the Central Pamirs in what is now Tajikistan. This is high-altitude terrain, ridges reaching 6,000 meters, glaciers, technical passes. The rules required a minimum of 6 people for a route of this class. And here comes the first crack in the story. One experienced member dropped out shortly before departure. Klochkov had to find a replacement fast. He took Evgeny Vol, 19 years old, the youngest and least experienced person on the team. So the final 6 looked like this: Klochkov himself, Irina Lebedeva, Leonid Lokshin, the married couple Rostislav and Olga Kristovsky, and young Volar 4 men, 2 women, 3 of them strong seasoned climbers, 3 of them not. Experienced mountaineers reviewing this case decades later keep circling back to that ratio. On a route where every member must carry their own weight through the hardest terrain the Soviet Union had to offer, half this team was operating at its limit from day one. The route was planned to take about 3 weeks, crossing a chain of high passes. On July 14th, the group reached the mountain village of Muk, one of the last inhabited points on their route. Near the village, they buried a supply cache, food for the second half of the journey, to be collected when they looped back through. Remember that cache. On July 18th, they climbed a pass called Ryzhiy, the Red One, and did what every Soviet mountain group did at every summit and pass. They left a note in a container, recording their names, their date, their direction. Standard practice. A paper trail across the mountains. That note on Ryzhiy Pass is the last confirmed trace of the Klochkov group that anyone has ever found. Think about what that means. After Ryzhiy, their route continued through several more passes. Every one of them should have received a note. Every note container on every pass ahead of them was checked, and everyone was empty. Whatever happened somewhere in the stretch after Ryzhiy, in a corridor of glaciers and ridges that searchers would soon comb, meter by meter. The group was due out of the mountains in early August. The control date passed. Silence. In the Soviet mountaineering system, a missed control date triggered an automatic response, and this response was massive. Helicopters, ground teams, experienced high-altitude climbers flown in specifically to search terrain that ordinary rescuers couldn't survive. The search covered an area of roughly 200 square kilometers of the Central Pamirs, some of it at altitudes approaching 6,000 meters. On August 15th, searchers found the supply cache near Muk, untouched. The food for the second half of the route was still buried exactly where the group had left it a month earlier. They never came back for it. Whatever stopped them on the outbound leg, deep in the high passes. And then the search found nothing else. Let me be precise about how strange that is, because this is the heart of the case. Mountain accidents leave debris. An avalanche buries people, but gear surfaces as snow melts. A ski pole, a bright jacket, a rope end. A fall into a crevasse takes a climber, but rarely 6 climbers with every single item they carried. A river crossing gone wrong washes equipment downstream where it snags on rocks. Searchers know what disaster looks like in the mountains, and it looks like scattered fragments. Here, there were none. 6 people and hundreds of kilograms of equipment, tents, ropes, ice axes, bright-colored gear designed to be visible. 0 items recovered. Not in 1989. Not in the decades of expeditions since. The search continued at full intensity until September 9th, when it was called off, and the reason it was called off tells you everything about the terrain. The searchers themselves were becoming casualties in waiting. The teams were physically wrecked, and pushing further risked adding rescuers to the missing list. Here is a dark detail from the official account. During the search for Kloshkov's group, rescue teams incidentally saved 2 other climbing groups who had gotten into serious trouble in the same region that season. The mountains were actively eating expeditions that summer, and the one they were looking for was the one they never found. So what happened after Ryzhiy Pass? The sober theory held by most veteran mountaineers goes like this. Somewhere in the high passes, the group was caught by a single catastrophic event, most likely a massive avalanche or a collapsing ice slope that buried all 6 at once, deep in a place searchers either couldn't reach or couldn't identify. The Pamir glaciers are hundreds of meters thick. Things that fall into them can stay locked in ice for decades, or forever. Under this theory, the group isn't missing. They're entombed precisely and completely in a grave that happens to be invisible. It's a solid theory, and it has one persistent problem: the weather records and the route. Researchers who reconstructed the group's likely path note that for a single event to erase 6 people and all their equipment without one trace surfacing in nearly 4 decades of glacier movement and summer melts requires an almost perfect alignment of bad luck. Possible, but the mountains usually give something back eventually. From the Kloshkov group, the Pamirs have given back nothing through 37 summers of melting ice. The vacuum, as always, filled with other versions. That the group met people, not weather. 1989 was a turbulent year on the Soviet Union's southern edge, and the region sat near sensitive borders. That they attempted an unplanned, more dangerous route variation and died far from where anyone searched. Relatives and fellow climbers organized their own expeditions for years afterward, walking the passes with the route book in hand. Every expedition came back with the same result as the first search: a note on Ryzhiy Pass, an untouched food cache, and a mountain range that refuses to say anything more. Today, the case remains formally what it was in September 1989. A disappearance. Not one of the 6 has ever been declared found. In St. Petersburg, the families have lived longer with the absence than they ever lived with the people. And somewhere in the Central Pamirs, on a pass called Ryzhiy, the last note sits in the record. 6 names, a date in July, a direction of travel into a stretch of mountains that closed behind them like water. 6 people, hundreds of kilograms of gear, 200 square kilometers searched, 37 years, 0 traces. What is your verdict? An avalanche that built a perfect tomb? Or did something happen in those passes that no search could have found? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe because the archive is deep. Next time, a radio station that has been broadcasting a buzzing sound for 50 years around the clock. And nobody has ever officially admitted who runs it or why.